Well, I told you so. Let's have a look. Hello everyone, Florian here, and welcome to another episode of HeiseSays. Grab your stein of coffee because I want to look at an article from the Sydney Morning Herald, which is pretty much, well, now highlighting what I mentioned many moons ago, many years ago now, to do with the home builder program. What I've said, it's overheating the market, and what they're saying is the home builder program overstimulated construction and drove house price inflation. Now, to all of us in the construction game, this is not a surprise at all. I'm surprised it's taken this long for the media to start emphasizing it, or for it to, well, come to the mainstream. But it just shows you, doesn't it? We can be right about these predictions. We can, scream to the skies about these issues, and political reality is different to actual reality. How many people cared? Everyone just wanted their free money. Everyone just wanted their handouts. Everyone just wanted to feel like they were getting a good deal. The government knew too. They didn't care. They just wanted to stimulate the economy, and they use housing and construction as their piñata for economic activity to whack it on. And, well, I don't know if anything will change. Maybe there needs to be a generational shift in using housing to stimulate the economy here in Australia. I'm fearful that the change will be even more interventionist, more equity partnerships, more government ownerships of private property, and more of a shift away from individual liberty. But anyway, let's have a look what they're saying here. So, more than 100,000 people drove the cost of the pandemic-era home builder program out to $2.3 billion. An analysis of the scheme has found, leading to an overheating of the building sector and adding to inflation pressures that had forced interest rate rises to a 9-year high. Let's remind ourselves, it wasn't just home builder guys. The government came to the rescue. Okay, you've got the cash rate at an insanely low level, artificially low level. Home builder, as we're discussing here, you've got other first homeowner grants. You get deals of up to 88,000 in discount and grants in Western Australia. Now it's even higher. You've got government loan guarantees. 2% was all some people needed to get into a house. 2%. How is that even normal? And maybe they're now the same people that are taking out loans to pay off their afterpay. Shit, William, one of the regular viewers here, he left a very good comment on that video about the reason why financial literacy seems to have disappeared. It's because they can afford to not be financially literate. We haven't had tough times. In 30 years, we haven't really had tough times here in Australia. You've got negative gearing, which is part of our culture. There's no way that's going to be removed. So don't kid yourself. And we also had the super withdrawals, which helped juice up the market. And I cannot blame people for getting their hands on their super money and deciding to get into a house. I would rather they could have done that before all of this other overheating of the market. So you're forcing a generation to lock away part of their money that they can use when they retire, which sounds good, but it means some of them are struggling to even get into a home. And it's better to have the stability of a home you own than not, particularly when you hit retirement age. Because they're not going to get rid of the pension, are they? Never. So, economists said the former coalition government was right to try to inject stimulus to avoid a collapse of the home construction industry at the peak of, should be the peak of the lockdowns, shouldn't it? But it became a victim of its own success with more than 3 times the number of people applying for the program than original estimates. So yeah, I mean, that's it. Well, what do you expect is going to happen when everyone's watching like The Block every other bloody day and it makes news here in Australia? And I couldn't get the home builder grant, guys. Because we're doing renovations right now. As I'm recording this, the Steelies are painting some steel and they're putting the final touches on the grout for a lot of our posts. I should have the excavator here tomorrow. I started doing some digging, and then I did about an hour of it, and I decided to hire an excavator again. So let's just say I'm getting experienced in operating the equipment and happy to avoid it. So In June 2020, the coalition government announced the grant program aimed at boosting economic activity in the building sector that had suffered through compulsory shutdowns early in the pandemic. The Department of Treasury originally forecast there would be 27,000 approved homebuilder grants at a cost of $678 million. But a review of the program conducted by KPMG with Treasury found by the end of June 2022, after the program had been extended twice, over 100,000 grants were approved at a total cost of $2.3 billion. Grattan Institute Economic Policy Program Director Brendan Coates said while the home building sector needed support at the time, it was now obvious that construction costs would be lower in a world where the home builder program had been smaller. It was obvious then too. It wasn't obvious. It's not just obvious now. It was obvious back then. It's pretty clear in hindsight that it's overstimulated residential construction and contributed to the levels of inflation that we're seeing today, he said. Yeah, in hindsight, we need... come on. Oh. And Labor were calling for more. It wasn't really the best value for money during a pandemic to offer grants for housing construction, and in particular renovations for people on a well above average incomes when we're struggling to house our community of homeless people. Now, this is the Grattan Institute, and let me bring up this organization here. Hang on. So let's remind ourselves about the Grattan Institute. They're a think tank, and they produce, high quality public policy recommendations for, Australia's future. They were public advocates for hard lockdowns. Okay, the Grattan Institute were advocates for very hard lockdowns. Now we're still seeing the damage of that to our economy. We've just got another video I put out about a restaurant that went under owing $1.8 million. They're builders that are going bust because of this overstimulation resulting from the hard lockdowns that the Grattan Institute pushed forward. Remember that, okay? We need to keep these things in our memory because we'll forget them. And people will say, oh yeah, they're advocating, they're helping for the homeless, oh, they're the good guys. No, they're not. They're authoritarians. The cost of new homes rose by 20.7% over the 12 months to September, according to the ABS, and it was a significant contributor to the increase in annual inflation. Inflation has reached 7.3% and is forecast to reach 8% by the end of the year, forcing the Reserve Bank to rapidly lift interest rates from 0.1% to 2.85% over the last 7 months. Housing Industry Association Chief Economist Tim Reardon said the scheme was the right solution to the problem at the time. Well, there was another solution, one that if you even dared to suggest it, you had your content removed from social media, you were ostracized in the public. That was perhaps to not so strictly lock down the entire economy. That was out there. And now we're seeing, in hindsight, look at Sweden, look at other countries that weren't as drastic as Australia was. Okay? So just keep that in mind. All of this that we're seeing here, all of this damage that we've done to our economy is self-inflicted. Think about it. It's restricting the number of people on construction sites is crazy. That was a short-term fiscal stimulus to bring the economy out of recession, and they succeeded in doing that, he said. The report found the program exceeded initial expectations across the country. In Victoria, fewer than 10,000 grants were forecast at a cost of less than $250 million, but more than 3 times that number were approved, and a final cost of more than $700 million. New South Wales and Queensland were both expected to get fewer than 6,000 grants, but New South Wales ended up receiving 17,500, while Queensland, more than 20,000 were approved. See, how can these politicians and bureaucrats be so far removed from the culture of the average Aussie? Money to do her house reno? Bloody oath, mate, sign me up. West Australia was expected to get fewer than 5,000 grants at a cost of under $100 million, but ended up with more than 3 times that number approved at a total cost of more than $400 million as home building boomed in the state during the pandemic. The review conducted by KPMG with Treasury said states and territories provided insights that the residential construction industry had experienced overheating over recent years. Oh, really? Oh, really? Oh, lucky. I wonder how much we spent on this review done by KPMG. How many bureaucrats sit there doing this stuff? Oh, boy. Oh, well, it's just chuck it more on the dead. Future generations will bear the burden. The Reserve Bank has also noticed in a September speech that Governor Philip Lowe said strong demand, fed by a combination of low interest rates and government grants, met pandemic-related supply issues to cause a big jump in prices, which affected the overall inflation rate of the country. Peter Tulip, chief economist at the Center for Independent Studies, said the biggest problem with homebuilder was it increased the demand for housing without addressing supply. So the lucky recipients were better off. Everyone else who is buying a house or is renting is worse off, he said. Well, the lucky recipients weren't better off because they paid higher costs for their projects than they otherwise would have. It overheated everything. So they were kind of screwed over by it too. You don't improve affordability by subsidizing demand. It's misdirected. We need to boost supply. But the problem is you've got the not in my backyard crowd who don't want that. You've got the environmentalists who don't want that. It's not going to happen. Honestly, I mean, I agree entirely. We need to boost supply here in Australia, but it won't happen. I mean, there was a article about a home investor, property investor. He got on the radio and he's bitching and moaning about all these handouts to people, and they all got up him because he had over 300 properties. Now, he rang me up. I had a chat to him the other day. He seemed like a nice bloke. What they didn't mention in that article was he's not just buying existing houses and turning them into rentals. He's building stuff. So he's got his own setup. He rolls his own metal, builds little spec houses, 2 on a block, and rents them out to families. He's creating supply. So someone like that, who should be held up high and look at that. That's something you need to aspire to. He's providing homes for families. It's the bloody tall poppy syndrome here in Australia, chipping away at people. So, yeah. Julep said the grant program has added to inflation and the government provided more assistance than it should have in hindsight, but no one accurately forecast the economic effects of the pandemic. Reardon said there were many inflationary pressures on the home building sector through the pandemic besides the home builder program. The key drivers were skyrocketing costs of building materials due to global disruption in supply and demand for labour, while record low interest rates drove demand. What was unknown was that a pandemic creates demand for housing, Reardon said. No, this is incorrect, Reardon. It's not the pandemic. It's lockdowns. It's lockdowns that creates demand for housing, forcing people to live in their shitty little box for unknown hours, restricting their movement and freedom. That's what would create the demand for housing. Certainly the low cash rate has to be the dominant factor. There's no doubt that it's responsible for a large part for the demand of housing. He said the increase in the cash rate will bring the boom cycle to an end. So there we go, everyone. And this article was written by Rachel Clun for the Sydney Morning Herald. And I seem to be getting a whole lot of Milwaukee ads. Milwaukee ads for power tools. You can tell what I shop for. So let's have a talk about this. Well, I told you so, guys, and I think none of you watching the channel are going to be surprised. None of you in the construction industry are going to be surprised. And remember, this is a federal conservative government that did this. What can we say? We all knew this was going to happen. We all knew it would inflate the market. They've missed the entire point of what caused this. And we've got to really, really look at the legislation that's in place that gives our politicians so much power to restrict our lives and intervene so much. But it's Australia, guys. It's not the land of the free. Don't kid yourself. So, there you go. Let me know your thoughts and opinions on this one. What can I say? We all knew it was coming, although our politicians pretended not to care. As always, thanks for watching. Check out HeiseBoom and HeiseSays International for other topics I discuss. If you want to support the channel, you can financially on YouTube or Patreon. Use our referral links, buy our pocket squares, or call us if you need an architect. Take care, everyone. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next episode of HeiseSays. Bye for now.